Again, welcome everyone. I'm Trish Silver. I'm a member of the GLA community, and this is our first quarterly community webinar of 2022. Our focus for today is on tips for an approach to vertical coaching. When we think about a vertical approach to coaching, today we're exploring this from the vantage point of the lived experiences of seasoned developmental coaches. Some of the topics that we want to cover are: what's the difference between performance coaching and vertical coaching? What does vertical coaching look like on the ground in a coaching session? And what are those things you really need to pay attention to for developmental coaching to land and bring the value that it can bring? So that's the territory we're in, and we'll see where we go. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists for today. Bob Elliott from the US, Jasmine de Klerk from Belgium, and Nick Owen from the UK. And we're going to start with the notion of what is the essence of vertical coaching. And so, Bob, I want to turn to you to invite you to just kick us all off in that exploration. What's the essence?
Okay, so when we were first exploring this, I thought about one of my favorite quotes, and it's in the chat, and it's from Carl Jung. Learn your theories as well as you can, but put them aside when you touch the miracle of the living soul. So for me, the essence of vertical coaching lies in that quote. And it's really this, when I think about vertical coaching, I think about working on vertical coaching and in vertical coaching. So when I'm working on vertical coaching, it's when I'm preparing, when I'm thinking about it, thinking about who I'm working with, thinking about action logics, and it's strategizing, and I go back into some of my earlier action logics of achiever or expert. And then when I'm in vertical coaching, I'm really thinking about, am I coming to this empty? And what I mean by empty, I don't mean thoughtless. I mean really thoughtful, right? And coming with this nothingness and putting all the theories aside so that I can be with the client, so that I can be right there where they are. And I don't have to worry about getting hooked or somehow falling back into an earlier action logic, like I'm in performance coaching and I want to go to my expert or my achiever. So that's, for me, that's really the essence, is bringing this nothingness or emptiness so I'm there with the client.
What Bob said, I can recognize myself. And on the one hand, there's the rigor of the prep, of really looking at the assessment, but then again, detaching yourself from it and being fully present once you are with the coachee, and just letting things bubble up and actually focus more on the sentence completion than actually the outcome of the assessment itself or the document. And I think something else that really occurred to me in my mind was doing a lot of debrief calls on different models, is that this is not an MBTI, this is not a workplace big five, this is a lot more fluid, this is about ego construction. So it's the willingness to actually let go of a specific outcome and to be able to be there and let things bubble up is, I find, really essential in the work that we're doing. And at certain times you just need to but I think, realistically speaking, wherever we are in our center of gravity, during the day, we are experts, we are achievers, and yet you cannot rush into a vertical development session. You just need to take the time to recenter and really be open to what is in front of you. And to remember, another one that I think is really important is the fluidity that is within the person in front of you, and your own fluidity, and not to to be really humble regarding your own center of gravity. Sometimes I hear people saying, I'm at the transformational stage. Well, what does that mean, right? It's don't put yourself in a box either as a coach. So remember your own fluidity and how easily you fall back to an opportunist. Just sit with me in the car and you'll have me as an opportunist.
Okay, yeah, I really resonate with what Bob, Jasmine have said. That sense of, doing my due diligence and preparation before the session, and then kind of just letting it go and trusting the improvisation based on the plan structure, the improvisation of the dance with the client to allow some of my thoughts to come in when and if appropriate, but really start with whatever it is the client wants to bring. So this issue of the looking from the inside out, and I think is really important for me. And the fact is that one of the great things I think about the GLP as a tool, as an instrument, is that we actually start a coaching inquiry with a huge amount of information which the client has provided in how they've completed the sentence stems. And it's such a rich way to explore, particularly, for example, issues where they've already put their finger on where they may be stuck or having issues, in terms of their interior exploration. But my sense is, what I don't want to do in a debrief is to give any kind of mini lecture. How can I support the client to find the action logics within themselves based on their own journey, based on their experience?
I think it's important and very fundamental and on the ground is take the mystery out of it. This isn't something that they have not done before, right? So at some point they were opportunists and they did some vertical development and they showed up inside a Diplomat. And at some point they were inside a Diplomat and then they showed up inside of Achiever. And so that's all been vertical development. This isn't new. This isn't mysterious. Sometimes it can sound like this very, high level work of development. And it's something they've been doing their whole life. And reminding them of that really takes all of the fear or mystery or the complexity out of it.
Where are the distinctions between performance coaching and vertical coaching, and where is the integration between the two of them?
I think it's really valuable what you just pointed on in terms of, you have performance coaching and vertical coaching, and sometimes they're crossing each other, and sometimes you're in and out of both. And I think it's always valuable to say, and to name what you're doing and to say, okay, I'm going to slip back into performance coaching for a minute, and then we're going to come back to vertical, and then when we're in vertical, we're in vertical. So to be able to differentiate those, and kind of coupled with that, for me anyways, what's really important is to think about your listening. So what's the particular listening that you bring when you're in vertical coaching, and how is that different when you're in performance coaching? Or said another way is, what are you listening for in the conversation with the client? So when I'm in performance coaching, there's a lot of listening for Achiever. And in terms of what are you making happen? What are you pushing? What are you bringing forth? Is there an agenda? Do I hear that you're on, you're on the point of achieving something, said simply. And when I'm in vertical coaching, I'm really listening for, is there this reframing? Is there this reimagining? Is there is there in the language, is there even some fear, even some concern, like, I'm treading in unforeseen, unnavigated waters. And there isn't that short-footedness. There's some questioning, there's some wondering, there's some, well, what about this? And what about that? And I'm not sure about that. Or, and there's talk about experimenting. So inside of vertical, there's it's more about not knowing than knowing, and it's more about exploring, and it's more about creating. So I'm listening for those kinds of things.
I'm thinking about it from the perspective of, does my coachee think that they're in total control of the situation?
That's a good
Or
one.
are they, or are they completely into kind of looking at it from different vantage points and starting to look at those different perspectives and kind of think, it might actually be, I might actually not know what's going on really, or, staying in that messiness perhaps.
You know, I think I'm also listening for information about the dance between whatever action logics are emerging and the context in which that person is operating. So, it may be they have capacity to be working at later stage and hold that and work with that if that's appropriate. But it may be the exigencies of the current situation require more of an earlier stage. And how might we honor that and support that at the same time as the stretch? So what's going on? What's the dance between the wider context that is inviting the client to be in certain ways, and are there other ways at their later potential that they could actually say sit within achiever and act from achiever, but with a more redefining or transforming awareness? And what would that give them?
There's an interesting question. I want to just circle back to Bob and Nick and Jasmine as our kind of designated panel today to open up some thinking around this question, and others may add in as well in chat. This idea that James raises, that it's come up that sometimes the client is being brought into coaching from extrinsic motivation. How do we assess the motivation of the client and how authentic it is?
I would say, it kind of goes back to the listening, but I think it's a great question. It's what would be possible if you were able to step inside of this, whatever the next action logic, what might show up? So I really like to hold it as a possibility question. And that's usually what I ask is what would become possible?
I mean, in several sessions, I think I've been in a situation where somebody's called in by the organization to have this conversation, but doesn't necessarily have or are at the point themselves that they actually are ready or fully interested in going there. And I think there's so many approaches to this, but there's also just something about just respecting that and just taking the conversation from where it's at. And I'm sure I'm not saying anything new here, but James, that's kind of where I'm coming from when I read your notes.
Mm-hmm. And I think Brendolyn has a comment in chat. Brendolyn, do you want to come off mute just to say a little bit more about what you were saying yes, I agree.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Brendolyn here. I think that's important, especially when it comes to assessments. I feel like it's more of a team agreement, and then people are identified to then take assessments, and then they kind of fall on my lap as their coach. And so before that, I really do create this context of how do you feel about that? Just this relatedness conversation. Like, I don't like to be forced, controlled, or told what to do either. And so you know, what's your choice here? You know, what are you choosing this for yourself? Because if you're not, it's not going to be workable. And I find that having that as the ground, and Bob, I love what you said, and then going to, okay, you know, if you're choosing, then let's create a larger context for possibility. What can we get out of this together? Because I'm going to be here right with you, but not if you're feeling forced to do it.
I'll go back to the beginning, right? We're always going back to the beginning, and for me, it's that experience of touching the miracle of the soul, right? You've cast away all of the shoulds and way it's got to be and where we got to go and what's got to get done, and really tapped in, and it's a two-way street, right? Somehow they've tapped into you and you've tapped into them, and it's this miracle of that soul, of that spirit, and it's just enlivening.
Mhm. Yes, Sue says allowing the coaching to happen through you, connected to something bigger.
I can kind of speaks to what somebody mentioned earlier on about, you know, touching into a vulnerability and opening up to a spaciousness between the self and the other, and to have experienced a kind of improvisational exchange, which can be extraordinarily invigorating and enlivening and deeply learning.
Well, thank you, Trish and the team. Lovely to hear your input. Next time, we'll be exploring something that builds on today, I think. As coaches, consultants in this field, we give a lot of attention to the later action logics, but of course, a lot of the clients and the organizations we work with will have a lot of expert and achiever leaders. So how do we engage expert achiever leaders with this vertical frame in a way that's really attractive and engaging to them? So join me next time, April the 6th, same time. Thanks, everybody. Lovely to see you.